I am Arlette Klaric, the somewhat new co-director of the museum, and we're very pleased to have you all here this evening. We are joined this evening by George Rodrigue's son, Jacques, and the curator of the foundation. And I should mention Jacques is the executive director of the foundation, and Marnie Robinson is the curator. And Jacques will be doing the gallery walk this evening, and we're going to start in this room. So I'll turn it over to Jacques.
There you go.
Thank you so much, Arlette. Everybody hear me good? So we'll try to make this pretty quick, about 30 minutes to walk through this room and the next room. I just want to thank you all so much for coming here. My dad is so sorry he couldn't make it. He's a little under the weather. But we hope that he'll be able to make it back here at some point during the exhibit. But in the meantime, you guys have me. And I know a little bit about this, and it's my birthday. Thank you so much. That's right. 25. Maybe. But yeah, my name's Jacques, and of course I've been with these paintings all my life. And I know a lot of people are probably wondering, am I an artist? I am not. I'm an attorney, but I work in-house with the galleries and with our foundation. Also with us from our foundation is Marnie Robinson. If you have any questions, please ask her or I, and she may interrupt me if I forget something, and if that happens, we'll give her the mic. But we'll start with this self-portrait back here. That is my dad, right after he finished art school. People thought he couldn't paint, so he had to show everybody that he could paint. But before he did that, he's a Cajun. He's from New Iberia, Louisiana. Very, very small town. No art museums, no libraries. Really kind of grew up, you know, in the 50s. He was born in 44, and so right when Americana was hitting, and out of the blue, he said he wanted to be an artist because he had contracted polio. As a child, he was bedridden one summer, and paint by number sets had just come out. And so he thought it was the greatest invention ever. He was about 7, 8 years old, and he would take these paint by number sets, and he hated painting in the little lines. So he'd flip the canvases over and paint monsters and the creature from the Blue Lagoon or whatever he wanted to on the other side. And from that moment, he said he was going to be an artist. And so for the rest of his life, he stuck to that plan. And it's kind of like whenever you say you're going to be an astronaut or something, or a cowboy, and his parents just kind of went along with it. And luckily they didn't discourage him, and all along the way he just kept painting. And it was after he finished high school, he started college at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, then it was called USL. And he was an art student there until he put a portfolio together and applied for art school in Los Angeles at the Art Center College of Design. And he was actually the first undergraduate student ever admitted based solely on his portfolio. So here's a guy, about 20 years old, never been out west, jumps on a train, heads out to LA, and is in LA in the middle of the 60s when everything is going crazy. Small town boy from New Iberia, his whole world opened up. And it made him, while he was in art school, he learned all of the classic ways to draw, to understand painting, understand shape, color, design. He studied graphic art, and through that education, that base, he began to look at where he was from in Louisiana a completely different way. Because he would come back on the trains and would drive back and see that Louisiana itself was changing. Where he was from was changing. You see, he was an only child, but his mom was one of 15, and his dad was one of 14.
Oh my gosh.
And they were first cousins. But they couldn't get married in Louisiana. They actually got married in Texas. So I don't know what that says, but So he grew up with all these older people in his life. You know, his aunts were in their 80s and 90s. I mean, he had all this old history, all this old photographs, all this old great parts of his culture that he was experiencing, and he was seeing it was changing from the old ways. And so when he got to Louisiana and finished art school and came back, he said, I want to visually interpret the history of the Cajuns and their culture. And he didn't know exactly what that meant, but he knew there was something special about the unique Louisiana landscapes, the oak trees, the swamps, our bayous, you know, very, very, you know, humid, very different from the rest of the country. And so that's what he started doing, was painting oak trees. So over here in this corner, you see some of his earliest oak trees from the late 60s, early 70s. And what he decided to do was, everyone before him usually painted the Louisiana oak trees in a European style, almost a bird's eye view, with the big tree, but also a big sky and little tiny people at the bottom. But he said, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my oak tree, shove it to the front of the canvas, cut it off at the top, and play with the tree, ground, and sky, and use all of these shapes to kind of show exactly what Louisiana is to me inside of my heart. And so that's what he did for 5 years, and he sold his first painting for about $50 and realized he can make a living, and painted all these great oak trees. And I'll tell you a quick story. He had his first show at the old state capitol in Baton Rouge. His cousin was actually the curator of the old state capitol, and they said, George, you know, we got a hole in the schedule. Can you bring some paintings? He said, okay, this is my big shot, you know. He's like 22, 23 years old, and he thinks he's gonna make it now because he's filled up a whole room with 100 paintings of oak trees. And this piece was actually in the show, back in that early show. And they told him the art critic from the Baton Rouge Advocate's gonna come and do a write-up on the show. So, okay, here we go, here it is, my first big write-up. I'm all excited. He waits a couple weeks and opens the paper, and there it is, right on the second page, all of his big paintings, all blown up, and the headline reads, "Artist paints dreary, monotonous oaks." And he said that was the good part. But she just trashed him and just said, you know, they were just too dark and looked too old and didn't look like Louisiana. And it was like she didn't understand what he was trying to say. This is his version of the tree. This is Louisiana. This is his history. And she didn't get it at all. But he learned a very important lesson, because the review was so bad, everyone decided that they had to go and see what was wrong with these paintings. And he sold every painting in the show. Had more money than he'd ever had in his whole life, and knew then that don't listen to what anybody else tells you, because you gotta just stick to what's in your heart and keep going. And so that's what he did. He kept painting these oak trees until a couple of years later he realized that he's gonna have to start painting people. And what would a person look like that had walked out from behind the oak tree and was on this landscape? And so he said they would be very primitive. Plus, we'll go through a little bit of the histories of the Cajuns for those of you that don't know. Cajuns are French people. They originally left France and settled in Canada around Nova Scotia. And when the British took over Canada, they actually kicked them out, and they had nowhere to go. This series of paintings behind you right here is the saga of the Acadians. It explains that whole history through 15 paintings of them settling the New World and then being kicked out and coming to Louisiana. And so he grew up with this history of these people that considered themselves French. So what he said he was going to do in that theme of graphically interpreting the history of the Cajuns was to make them look like they were cut out and pasted on this landscape. So he always works from photographs. He had all these old photographs from his family. So this picture right here is a picture of my grandmother's class. And so notice how they're all in white and there's a very hard edge around them. Theoretically, if they're under this tree, they should be in shadow, but they're not, because the culture inside of them glows out. That is the white from inside of them. And what's also important is this light at the background. That's the hope of the Cajuns. That's what that light is far away. And notice how none of their heads ever touch the other light in the background. See, that was another graphic element that he was doing to first paint these people and then build the landscape around them, so you can actually understand that these people were cut out and pasted here in Louisiana. And so for him, all of these graphic elements, he was there. This is pop art to him. This is abstract. This is not a realist interpretation of what Louisiana looks like. This is his visual, graphical way of showing things, and lots of positive and negative shapes happening here. So for him, the shape of this sky and the shape of this bush, the way they interact, is just as important as the subject of the people themselves. So as you walk around all the rooms, just remember that. That's where his ideas come from, is this graphic interpretation. And so he just kept painting all these Cajun people, like the Cajun Bride of Oak Alley, or this is a famous chef in Louisiana, Paul Prudhomme. He's got great food, great restaurant, and this painting actually usually hangs in that restaurant in the French Quarter in New Orleans, but he lets us borrow it every now and then. He actually lives across the street from us in New Orleans. He's a great friend, but this is depicting the great Cajun omelet. This is a real festival in Louisiana. We have a lot of fun. So this is in Abbeville, Louisiana, and they have a sister city in France called Abbeville. And what they did in this French city was they have this festival every year. One year the French troops were moving somewhere and they were all very hungry. So they rounded up all the eggs they could in town and made a big omelet for the French troops. And so that's what they do in Abbeville now, every year. If you come and read this, it says 5,000 small eggs, 6.5 gallons of milk, and they put it in this big fryer and make eggs for everybody. So that's what my dad did, was just keep visually showing these stories that he had grown up with, or other festivals that were happening around Louisiana. Some of you guys may be familiar with the story of Evangeline. She was the protagonist in the book by Longfellow, and she had lost her lover Gabriel during the Grand Arrangement, during this saga, the Acadians, and she had wept for him at the oak tree in St. Martinville, Louisiana, and then she died the day before that he actually made it to find her. So it's a very sad story. But he painted many different versions of her as a Cajun legend of Evangeline. Similarly with Jolie Blanc, there's a very famous Cajun song. Is written by a prisoner actually in Port Arthur, Texas. He was from Louisiana, but it's a French song, a French waltz, and it's Jolie Blanc, I love you, I miss you, come back to me, but it's all in French. And so there's many different versions of the Jolie Blanc. So before we get to the Blue Dogs, remember that history of always looking to folklore or other stories of Cajun culture that influenced his painting subjects. And as we go around the room,
What started the Blue Dog idea?
I'll get there, I promise. What's lucky about this show is the first blue dog ever painted is in the other room, so I'll tell the whole story of that.